Welcome to Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Welcome, everyone. So glad for all of our listeners tuning in today for today's episode. I'm super excited about our topic. You know, one of the things about the podcast is we get to talk to some amazing humans who are doing really amazing work and have a great lens for us to view through and think about how we do our work day to day. And today is no different. We're going to really be diving into leadership and continuous learning, this idea about driving wellness initiatives in the workplace, maybe thinking about wellness, not from what a lot of people try to sell us around wellness, right? But diving into it. So I'm super excited that on today's episode of Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, we are delighted to welcome Amber Carlson, a visionary leader in the realm of organizational development and leadership. She's the president and CEO of Archway Learning Solutions and has dedicated over a decade to designing transformative learning solutions that align closely with business goals and enhance organizational culture. Known for her dynamic and engaging approaches, Amber integrates continuous learning with wellness initiatives to foster environments that promote growth and well-being. Her work has been recognized internationally with awards for excellence in education, spans various industries, making her a sought-after speaker and consultant who was gracious enough to give us some of her time so we could learn from her today. Welcome, Amber. We're so glad to have you on today's show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to dive into this subject. It's near and dear to my heart.
I love that. And that's exactly what I want to do. I just want to dive in because I've got a feeling we could spend 2 hours, but we don't exactly have 2 hours of time that we can talk about this. So maybe you can I know that you have been a pioneer in integrating learning and wellness within organizations, but could you share with us maybe what inspired you to focus on sort of this unique intersection? Because what I found in the podcast is the story of how people arrive to this place is usually pretty interesting first, but also tells us a lot about what we can learn on our journey here. And as I've said with many of my guests, the work that you're doing wasn't exactly on any career application in high school, right? So we're interested in the journey. So how maybe did your personal values or whatever you deem inspire you to focus on this particular work?
So for me, it's all about continuous learning. Ever since I was little, I was always hungry to learn and grow. But as I grew older and became more involved in corporate training and working with my clients, I also saw that there's this part of us that just wants to work, nose to the grindstone, never stop, because we feel like that's what's needed to achieve our goals. And then you get burned out, stressed out, overwhelmed, impacts relationships negatively, definitely is detrimental to your health. Stress is one of the worst things that we can endure long term because it's a killer. So ultimately, I think my biggest message, I'm just going to start with it, is that healthy and happy humans perform better, uplift others, and stay longer with an organization. So when we can create that space where they're healthy and happy, then they're more likely to achieve the goals that we want and we need. And that goes for us just as much as it does for our teams.
Yeah, because I think there's been a long time, and listen, both of us do very similar work, right? Like, that from a old school leadership philosophy that, listen, employees will just go down the road for the extra quarter an hour or something. And what we're really learning in modern research, to your point, this piece about staying is people go or stay because of the culture and because of their wellness and how they actually feel at work, right?
I think a lot of times people will ask me what's the difference generationally as well. And so I'm a Zennial. So which or an older millennial, if you will. So I grew up with the dial tone, and I know what a fax machine and tape recorder is and all that stuff. But when you speak with different people about generational gaps in the workplace, the younger generation, they're coming from a place of, well, who knows what the future will hold and how easy it is for me to jump from place to place, or maybe being an influencer is worth my time and my side hustle could make more money. So why give the effort? It's not just the carrot or the stick that can make the impact anymore. It's truly connecting with the human. That's how you find and keep the top talent, hands down.
So I agree totally. I'm always intrigued when people bring up the generational gap to me. Listen, I'm fully in the Gen X, so I got a couple of years on you, but I'm also super inspired by the generations younger than me. In fact, like I'm just like, oh, please take over. Yes, please do it now. But one of the things that I'm really intrigued by is that I hear a lot, right, from the generation older than me who's still in the workforce, and from my generation, like, oh, the younger generation just doesn't want to work. What I always find really interesting about that comment, I disagree fully, but what I find interesting about the comment is that my generation and the generation above me has complained a lot about the workforce and about not being treated fairly at work, not feeling like we're seen. And the younger generation is like, I don't want to sign up for that. And somehow we're surprised, right? Like we've had not very great things to say about working conditions. And then we're surprised our kids don't want to join and sign up for the same pain.
I agree. I think ultimately when I hear the younger generation doesn't want to work, what I translate that to in my head is that our generation hasn't done a good enough job to inspire, motivate, and provide resources for them to know how to work in a way that's healthy for them and good for the organization. So they're not equipped in academic experiences to understand how to do that. They learned really important things there, how to learn, how to be responsible, but they don't learn really what's needed in working in an organization. And so that does end up falling on the shoulders of that organization to teach them the way they need them to work and operate.
So that makes me curious, like, because you're so dedicated to creating learning experiences, and I heard you kind of use that right there, is how do you see leadership then evolving to incorporate wellness into the organizational culture?
I think it has a lot to do with leading by example, as in most things, right? So leaders themselves need to prioritize their own wellness. And you can't say to someone else, go take your vacation time because it needs to be done, or take your break or whatever that may be if you are not doing that yourself. I am a firm believer in protecting nights and weekends, all about making sure that people don't feel obligated to do the work. I'll have people on my team even to say, okay, well, I'll work on that over the weekend, Amber. My response is, I hope you don't. Please don't. Please. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. Take all of Monday. We'll figure it out. And I encourage that with my clients I work with and partners. Take the time for yourself. So I think first and foremost, leaders should lead by example. Another example would be like at a team meeting, or maybe it's a holiday party. Then to make choices that are wellness choices, healthy options for people to choose from, so that they have, healthy food that they're enjoying, that it's at a time where they're not staying super late and still get home for their family. So really just leading by example is my first thought.
Yeah, I love that, the role modeling, right? Because I definitely grew up in a generation of do as I say, not as I do, right? Versus this, what we know about the brain in general is that we actually do what we see, not what we hear, right? So we begin mimicking people's actions more so than people's words. So, what are some strategies? You kind of mentioned a couple there about, hey, it's really hard to say take your PTO if you're not taking your PTO, or to do these things if you yourself aren't doing those things. But what are maybe some other key strategies that leaders, that organizations could think about integrating for this idea around continuous learning with wellness? Because it seems to me there's also a misnomer that wellness has to look one specific way.
So when it comes to that, the first thing a leader can do or an organization can do is to make wellness a core value. So we often see core values in companies of integrity and innovation and quality, which are all absolutely necessary. But if wellness becomes an actual core value of the organization, then that then supports actual policy, programs, resources dedicated to making that possible. So that would be the very first thing I'd recommend, is to truly, and it's actually one of our core values at Archway, is wellness, because it's so important. We can't show up as our full selves if we are not healthy and if we don't have that balance in our lives. So typical like offerings, standard offerings of training, when you have that wellness as a core value, is like physical fitness or nutrition, mental health, time management. Those are more standard offerings. But to your point, that's not all wellness is, right? There could be training on emotional intelligence, stress awareness and management, not just managing it, but being aware of it in others and in yourself first in order to then manage it within that dynamic. Even wellness-based decision making. How do we make decisions that have wellness at the forefront? Financial wellness is important as well. Critical feedback, how to maintain wellness in our relationship. So there's so much more to it than just go work out and eat a salad.
Yeah, so I love thank you for saying that, right? Because that's probably, as a consultant myself, the thing that irritates me the most is like, that's actually like, eat whatever you want. That's gonna be on the bottom of my wellness list, frankly. I sort of emotionally want, if I can have emotionally regulated folks around me, I'm way better off, right? So that's where my mind always goes first, of course. But you said a really key word there, that will probably take us down a rabbit hole, Amber, but that's what I love on this show, which is relationships. Because I think one thing that leaders assume, and again, I'm going to use I statements, just speaking for myself, Amber, but it's something that I see all the time, is that leaders who assume because they're the leaders that they have relationships with their staff that exists just based on who they are in the organization. But I find that to be like the critical component. How many times I say in an organization, do you even know something about the people you work with besides their job title and what they do here? Like, do you know anything? Like, before we can even have those tough conversations or talk about emotional intelligence, like, am I even safe here? Because if I don't know anybody or I feel isolated, not good for my own well being, but also we're never going to get to those other components, right?
Yeah, you're actually touching on something interesting. I'm going to mention my book that's coming. It's called Forge, and Torch is an acronym. And the very first foundational skill any leader must instill in their teams with the letter T is trust. We have to have trust first. And then coming along with that is when you establish trust, you want to establish a team that has ownership within what they do. So I have ownership of my emotional regulation, of my projects, of my responsibility, of my own learning. I own that as a leader, but my teams also need to take ownership. Relationships is the third one. We have to foster relationships with people, genuine relationships, as you pointed out, not just knowing their title and their name. I mean, sometimes they don't even know their name, right? They just, well, this person is the director of whatever, but who are they and what's important to them? So genuine relationships. Communication is next, because in order to be successful in any of those things, you must be able to communicate effectively. And then humility is the last one, that we must maintain humility as a leader, but also as a team member, as a contributor, because we're all in it together. It's not just my ego that's driving it. It's uplifting others in order to achieve the ultimate greatness that we can create together than just what is it that I say or that she says. So that's the acronym of TORCH. So the book is TORCH, Ignite Teams, Forge Legacy. And it's interesting you brought up relationships, because that's right at the center of life.
Because we can't do that. And so I hear you say that, and I'm hearkening it, of course, right? I can only relate it to things from my own experience. And so I hear you say that, and I think, yeah, I mean, you're hitting the big points there, right? Trust, ownership, relationship, communication, humility, which I appreciate. So where does safety play a role in that? Because one of the things I hear, Amber, day in and day out is, I'm not safe. And one of the things I started asking when I hear that is, first, a check in. Are you really not safe, or do you just have something hard to say? Because I think sometimes, right, we say, oh, I can't say that, I'll get fired. And it's like, I've never really seen someone, I'm not saying it hasn't occurred, but I haven't seen anyone get fired because they've said something. But sometimes we have something hard to say. It's not easy to tell people that they have spinach in their teeth, right? Like these things aren't easy and it can make us uncomfortable. And then we tend to avoid, but we do that because we don't feel safe saying things and we haven't um, typically had conversations about how do we say hard things? How do we talk about hard things? So I'm wondering in your torch realm, where do you fit in safety? Thinking not just physical safety, because of course, workplace violence is talked about all the time, but our emotional, our psychological, our, to your point, our financial safety, our racial and cultural safety. How does that fit into what you're talking about?
So I think to me, what comes to mind is psychological safety because when you work in organizational development, learning development, one of the first things you should be doing is creating an environment where mistakes are okay, questions are okay, pushback is okay, better ideas are okay. It's not just because I'm the facilitator that I have all the answers. Even if you have a subject matter expert who developed the program from the ground up, there could be something that's missed. So psychological safety is the first step that a facilitator should do. And I would argue that a leader should take when establishing teams or a team meeting. So that's the start. And so to me, if I think about that in the torch realm, again, I go back to that first one is trust. Because if you don't have trust, then, I mean, I'll tell you right now, Shannon, if I have spinach in my teeth, you got to tell me or it's going to impact my relationship with you, right? Like, you gotta have my back. You would want that dynamic. You would want to be in a space where you can say, "I don't like that," or "This you spoke to me in this certain way," or "You said this certain thing and it hurt me." But you can't get there without trust. That's why it's first.
Yeah, and so I know right now we have leaders that are listening, all kinds, formal and informal leaders of all kinds. I say this all the time, even if you're leading a 3-year-old at home, right? Like this applies everywhere in my mind. And so but I know that we have leaders, especially in organizations and systems right now who are like, but it's so overwhelming. Maybe we've been in a difficult culture for a long time, maybe a toxic culture, not a pleasant culture, especially in this post COVID world. A lot of people are exhausted, a lot of systems are exhausted. In your view, what's maybe one or two essential components for a successful wellness program? Like if someone is just like, I don't even know where to begin, Amber, like it feels so big and so overwhelming. And this kind of change takes a really long time. And sometimes we just need a success, right? We need something to go well. Something essential that our leaders could be thinking about doing to start moving the needle in a more positive direction?
I think if I were to say like a zero entry idea. Like, what's something that smoothly they could move into? The first thing would be is to connect with their teams and make that connection a priority for all leaders. So, if the senior leadership they're connecting with their direct reports and making a point to say you now need to go and connect with yours and so forth. To the point where now the entire organization has this connection. And when I say connection, what I mean is kind of back to the relationship is what's important to you? What are your goals? How are you feeling? Tell me about your family and your life, right? Making a genuine connection of human to human. Start there. And that might sound overwhelming, especially if you have 700 employees, 3,000 employees. But I go back to lead by example and set the tone that I expect us to work in an environment where we're treating one another with respect and kindness so that we can have trust, so that we can bring up those challenging questions or ideas. And quite frankly, that having that environment actually decreases the likelihood of anything litigious because you by having trust there, people aren't going to be as ticked off. They're going to have more grace. They're going to want to work together and work it out. So you're decreasing the possibility of someone then leaving the organization and placing blame for some reason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you see me just nodding my head as you're talking because I think that relationship piece is more critical than anyone wants to give credit to. And I also think it's the thing people try to make the excuse like we don't have time for that. We don't have time to do an icebreaker. We don't have
Oh, well, do they have time to go to court?
This is exactly where I'm going, right? Which is like, you don't have time for anything else. Like, if you don't have time for this, nothing else is happening. Because for me, it's inside out work, right? Like, if you want things to be good for your customers, your patients, your clients, whoever it is, insert your end user, it's got to be good internally, right? Like, clients and patients aren't going to feel safe if staff doesn't feel safe. Their patients aren't going to feel connected if your staff doesn't feel connected. I mean, these are the parallel processes that always start. And so I, even as I heard you like, hey, you connect with your direct reports and then their direct, I'm just like, y'all need to interconnect as well, right? It's the work of, I've watched people like, we never go to the fourth floor kind of mentality, right? Oh, the third floor never comes here. Like, I don't even know who works on the third floor of this building. How teams become siloed. And when you put them in the room together, and this just happened to me in a training where a bunch of individuals were complaining about something that was happening in the organization. They're like, listen, we know that nobody in this room can help with this problem. And they started going. And a person in the room stood up and said, I can absolutely make that change. Like, that's actually what I do here. like, no one's ever brought this up to me. Like, it was the first, because they were so siloed that typically when they were having the standard complaint, right, fell on deaf ears because the people you're complaining to have no control over that piece of the work, and vice versa. So that's also one of my questions, which is, how do you help that? How do you help break down silos? And I think this relationship is part of it. But how do you also balance trends and influencers in this space, which there are aplenty, Amber, right? If you put wellness into TikTok, your head will explode. How do you balance kind of the trends, some of which are really good, by the way? I don't want to, like, it doesn't mean they're bad just because they're there. Some are, but not all, with the need for consistency because we know how much practice it takes to actually integrate something as well.
So if I hear your question correctly, is how do we break down silos that may exist and doing that in such a way that is genuine and well received and not necessarily seen as just a new fad, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So for me, part of my journey in writing Torch was interviewing a whole bunch of leaders. And I continue to do it to this day because so much value came out of doing that. Time and again, those leaders, and you can read this in leadership books as well, time and again, those leaders that were the most endeared, that were the most followed, that had the largest dedication of employees that wanted to stay and would, or even leave other companies to work with them, was because of their connection, that relationship with them, that they would take the time to go into the lunchroom and sit down with anyone, that they would take the time to walk into someone else's office and have a conversation, that it wasn't my title defines the relationship that I have with my team. It is my connection with them defines that my genuine interest in them, that it makes it more, again, about being a human and not a title. So it's the roles versus souls idea, right? We all have roles, but we need to connect to the souls of other people, so that they join us in our vision and our mission, that they join us in stuff that can be challenging and hard and exhausting, but we're in it together.
I mean, that's hard. I mean, I know it sounds so simple when you say it, and right? Like, yeah, let's just connect, let's find time, especially for people who are like, Amber, I'm already burned out. I just told you I don't have enough time, and now you're asking me to give more time. So I'm just wondering, from your super diverse background in designing these kinds of solutions, what innovative methods have you found to be most effective in delivering this kind of wellness education to diverse teams?
So I have the most innovative idea to share with
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I love that. Those are my
Like,
favorite. Those are my
so
favorite.
simple, and it's actually not adding anything to your schedule. Everybody should be eating lunch, right? This is wellness. We need to eat well and make sure that we're staying fueled. So rather than eating lunch alone or sitting at your desk, take the time. maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every single day in the week, but take the time and go have lunch with someone on your team that you do not have a strong connection with. Now, I'm not saying that maybe you're in some disagreement with them, although there is some validity to doing that. But what I mean is to build a relationship, to break bread. Yeah, that is one of the, it seems so simple, but you're already taking the time to do it. So you're not adding to your schedule, you're just adjusting your priority.
So, what about for remote teams, Amber? Because I think, now in the post-COVID world, especially, this is, and we've seen a lot of pushback with now everyone has to come back to the office so we can all the things, right? And listen, I work remotely with my team. We're all over the country. Do you have I love to hear your innovative idea because we're not going to have lunch necessarily, right? So what, I mean, we will have lunch, but not together. Like we're not going to be able to do that. So because my lunchtime is at a different time than your lunchtime and all of the things that factor in. Any suggestions for those working remotely with teams or members of their team?
There's a different challenge there because you have to know something. You should anyway, whether you're in the same building or not, but know something unique about your teammates, something that's motivating to them that they're passionate about. I am in the same boat as you. My entire team is remote across the country. Only two of us are in the same state, much less the same town. And so I make it a point with my team. I reach out to them intentionally and check in with them. And there's lots of different technologies and ways of doing that. It doesn't have to be a 45-minute phone call. Although depending on the size of your team and your direct reports, I'd recommend at least an hour a month that you're having a one-on-one with all of your direct reports, where you're focused on your relationship and projects as well, at least. But for me, I make it a point to know about things in their lives and follow up. So I'm a sales girl at heart. That's where I started my career. And if anyone that knows anything about sales knows that if you keep great notes on the people you're engaging with and you know what motivates them, what inspires them, then you'll show them how much you care. So I have to take great notes of my team and all of those that I work with. And I reference that until it gets to the point where I already know it. That helps me when I have new team members. I take notes on them. Okay, this is important. They have kids at this age. This is what they like to do for fun, and follow up with them about it until I'm to the point where I just know them, right? Eventually, you don't need your notes, right? You know your team. But that helps a lot when you're initiating a process like this is to, okay, what do I know about my team? What do I have in common with them? How can I relate to them? And having the intentionality of doing that, that's going to be your first step.
I love that. So sales is not my background, Amber, but because my background was working in a law office, we kept notes because we never knew what was going to be important, right? So like a client would tell you something and your job was to like make a note. Like regardless of how it may have nothing to do with their case at all, seemingly, but it might be important at some point. So you would take a note. What's interesting about me coming into private practice is that I think my brain developed some sort of habit around it because people, I speak publicly. I'm at events with large groups of people, much like you, and somebody will make an offhanded comment to me, and then I might see them a month, 6 months, a year later, and they'll say, "Oh, you probably don't remember me." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, your dog is a, mini schnauzer or whatever the case may be." And they're like, "How do you remember that?" I'm like, Amber's thing about notes is really helpful in all kinds of settings, everybody. It's really helpful in relationship building in all kinds of ways. I love that.
It's funny you say that because sometimes just the act of writing the note down helps you to remember it later, whether you have to reference it or not. It's really fascinating. I'll tell you a funny story. My dental hygienist, every time I see her, which is every 6 months, right? She remembers what we talked about. Oh, did you go on that vacation? Oh, did you see that concert? Oh, I remember that movie you were talking about. And it is as if she remembers it, that I know she's taking great notes.
I know.
Real impressive. I will never not go see her. She's awesome.
But that's
It's
part of
really
it, right? Is like that she's engaged makes you engaged, which was my point about Inside Out is like, I don't think you would feel that way even if she was asking you those questions if she wasn't engaged in that work that she was doing, right? So,
And it's
um
the dentist. I mean, who likes that? But I do. I like going to see
okay,
her.
I do not, Amber, you can go for me. Go for me. Can you we sort of started touching on this with regards to the remote teams, but can you talk about technology in enhancing wellness. Now, listen, we know how much technology can decrease wellness. I just the 1 a.m. email from your boss kind of scenario, right? We know how it can decrease, but can you point us in the direction about how we can use technology to enhance wellness and to enhance learning in today's workplace?
Certainly. So I think you already pointed out the first thing I would say, which is to have boundaries around it. That's the first step. And so that comes with policy that we will not send out emails at 1 a.m. Now, of course, that doesn't make sense for all organizations, right? If you're working in healthcare, you have to send it out because if there's an emergency, then you got to do it. But if there are ways of putting boundaries around that or having someone be the point person for communication for that evening, essentially being on call, then that would be the first thing to consider because technology does not equal success. How we use it does. So the second piece, there's so many really cool things out there that can be used, and many of them are free. For your organization, having an internal hub or library that makes it simple and easy will make it more likely that it will be utilized, found, right? Found and utilized, but also more likely that people will follow what it is that they're learning in that area. So it's just about centralization and making it easy to access. Because I mean, if YouTube required you to click 12 buttons to sign in, would you really look at YouTube? Probably not. So we want to simplify it. And I find with larger organizations or even sometimes mid-size, they've just made it too complex with too many platforms. Simplify. Boundaries and simplification, and then going to the marketplace and finding what works. So
I love it. Do you have
learning experience platforms are really cool for that too.
some favorites? Like if people are kind of poking around, you got a couple of favorites you want to shout out to?
So I am technology agnostic. So what that means for me is it depends on what the company wants and what they're seeking to achieve. If I were to point someone in direction from a personal standpoint and they wanted to learn and grow, there's something that's called a MOOC, MOOC. Basically, it's a free online learning on all different topics taught by the top academic universities that exist. So you can learn from professors at MIT and Harvard. You won't get the degree, but you can learn the same content, and it's absolutely free. So that's one place to go. Of course, that requires research. Having someone on the team, maybe not completely dedicated, it could be partial dedication, or maybe you do hire someone fully dedicated to identifying these resources and organizing them. That would be a great step as well. It has to be prioritized. It's not going to just be easy and fall in our lap, just like working out, eating healthy, managing our budget, managing our emotions and stress isn't easy. We can't snap our fingers. It takes work. And just like developing a wellness program, well, you just have to prioritize it.
I love it. So we'll put a link to MOOC in the show notes for our listeners because I know some of you are driving, exercising, you're not writing notes. That's my job. I'll write the notes for you. So we'll get a link to that. I'm super excited to check it out myself. So, Amber, as you kind of look into the future, what trends do you anticipate? Because for me, wellness isn't going anywhere in the workplace. There's a lot of work for a lot of companies and organizations and communities to do around this. But what do you anticipate or see at this intersection of leadership and wellness? Maybe you can give us something over the next 3 to 5 years that you see. So it's kind of that short term horizon. And then maybe what do you see 10-ish years when Gen Alpha starts entering the workforce about what changes might be coming?
So I would say I'm very AI focused right now. And how can we leverage AI to do what we want it to do? And there's already incredible improvements that are happening right now. I know I argue with my AI pretty much every day, asking it questions and brainstorming ideas and then disagreeing. So I see AI being leveraged more than ever to focus on wellness, focus on fulfilling all of these different things that we don't typically think of when we think of wellness, but now we'll have the capability to faster than ever before. And quite frankly, I mean, for everyone that's listening, if you're struggling with how to create a wellness program, why don't you ask your AI? have it do some research for you to fast forward the organization of that. And then, of course, you have to vet and verify. But I would say AI is going to continue to dominate. I also think, though, that because of the change generationally, that everybody wants to crack the code of how can we get these kids to work? Well, the answer is prioritizing them, right? Where that's a shift that we've gone from where the organization is the top priority to the humans that are the top priority. I think we will see that. I
Human
think that will
centered.
come
That's what
sooner
we
than
say
later.
around here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will, because those companies that do that are the ones that last, and those that don't get bought up by the ones that last, right? Say, sorry, it's not working out. We're taking over and improving. So I think there's going to be a lot more policy focused on wellness. Something that irks me is when I hear people say, well, why do we have to spend all this time on mental health? And why do we need to spend money on, providing emotional intelligence training? Can't people just come to work and do their jobs? Well, the answer is, well, yeah, they can, but they're going to be miserable and then they're going to leave. So if you want to keep them and you want to keep them performing at their optimum level, like, yeah, it's worth the time and the resources to dedicate to learning about wellness, whether it be stress management or any of the pieces we discussed.
I love that. So I got to get to us to our quick fire questions here shortly. But before we do that, just a couple more things that this is like, right. My brain is start like, hey, let's have another hour long conversation. But Amber, what's one piece of advice that you could give to leaders to more effectively integrate wellness, you think, into their culture? And I'm thinking, let me asterisk that a second, because I'm thinking about a leader who's maybe been in the organization a long time. They work in a really hierarchical system, right? I'm thinking about some of the people I work with in government agencies and lots of rules, lots of protocols, lots of pieces that they don't necessarily have power or control over. They're kind of getting dictated and mandated to all the things that they have to do. Do you have, especially for those folks, just one piece of advice about trying to do this change?
Yeah. So I think it goes to when you feel like you got your handcuffs on and you can't move one way or the other without all the red tape and needing to form a committee for a committee to make a decision on a pencil, right? We've being in that position is very frustrating. The only thing that we can control in that case is ourselves. And so talk about it. Talk about wellness. Wellness is not a dirty word or some fad to just kind of snark at. It's wellness is a priority. That's why it's called wellness, right? Because we want to all be and live well. So talk about it. Don't let it be a hush hush topic. Talk about it, embody it, live it. That's the only way you're going to start to make waves.
Name it, tame it, baby. Name it, tame it, right? So, what about Amber? Got anything you're excited about? Like projects that you're doing? Maybe these are personal goals or projects that you're excited about in the realm of learning and wellness. And how do you think that those things might impact the organizations that you work with?
So I'm really excited about so the Torch book that I mentioned is book one. There it's a three-part series, and so I'm excited about rolling out the next two books. I'm excited about the programs that are coming along with Torch. So being a learning and development nerd, and I'm proud to say it, I had to ingrain learning activities in the book, and they are available with facilitator guides on how to implement them. So part of what we are rolling out next is to provide those resources to be able to host those activities, bring that trust, ownership, relationships, communication, and humility, those foundational skills to organizations that might be stuck. They might feel the handcuffs. So let that other another group come and share and support that growth. So I'm excited a lot about that. Personally, I'm excited about my own wellness. I am a breast cancer survivor. Well, I'm in remission, I should say. I haven't gotten survivor level, but I'm in remission and continue to be healthy. I've prioritized my health more than ever in my entire life over this last year and a half. So that is a big personal victory. And to add to that, for any ladies or anyone that knows a lady, I found out I had breast cancer on my very first mammogram. And if I hadn't gotten it, I wouldn't have known because I had no other
Yes.
symptoms of
So,
any.
Amber, listen, we are not a health podcast, but we will give a shout out to please go get your mammograms. And by the way, men need to get mammograms as well. Like if you have I did not know this, but I have recently learned, especially men, if there's history of breast cancer in your family, men can get breast cancer. That is a real thing. And so more mammograms for everybody. It's not the funnest thing for some of us larger chested women, but we can do it. We need to get it.
Well, I think ultimately to me, it just goes back to being healthy, but being intentionally healthy, like taking action and make sure that you're healthy.
I love it. I can't wait to hear how you're going to answer these quick fire questions because I always find them. I feel like I learn a lot from our guests in the show. I've learned a lot from you. Here's all my notes. Everyone knows I'm always showing my notes and talking about how many notes I take with our guests. But I learn a lot about our guests in these quick fires. So tell us the latest book that you've read or a TV show that's caught your attention, whatever you're binging on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And why did it stand out for you? This can be for pure fun or if it's related
Okay,
to
well, I don't know if I'm
wellness.
allowed to say the title of the book here, but
Oh,
it's
you
The
can.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Flip, I will
Got
say,
it.
to be
Yeah.
appropriate. It is a great book. And what drove me to wanting to read it, I was recommended this book years ago, and I bought it and just sat there and didn't read it. And you could see I had lots of books. This isn't even an iota, but they really are. I love to read. So I cracked this one open because I was feeling that kind of like pressure and feeling some stress. So like, how can I just not give a crap anymore? What is this going to really all be about? And each chapter I read, I have to read it and then sit it down and like process it and really chew on it. This is so real. How can I implement this in my life? So that particular book really is fun for me to read. I had just read prior to that, The Five Temptations of a CEO. Was recommended that book because it's also a parable, much like my book Torch is a parable. So I thought that was a really easy read, and a good read. For fun, I read a lot of Ken Follett, Paulo Coelho. I read all of Amy Tan's work. Paulo, he'll be quoted a lot in my book, so because I'm a huge fan. But historical fiction is my favorite. So it's kind of a mix of that.
All right. Well, you just moved The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F up my list. It, much like you, was recommended, and I was like, okay. Hasn't quite made its way to the top of the stack, but I'll move it up a couple of notches based on your recommendation there. So appreciate it. If you could have dinner with a historical figure, contemporary leader, who would you choose? But what's the one question you would want to ask them?
Honestly, it's so personal to me. It's not someone that anybody else knows but me. It's my grandmother. He and I are kindred spirits through and through. And she passed away at 98, so she had a full and amazing life, but I miss her
And what's her
tremendously.
name?
Hildur, Hildur, Hildur. Yeah.
Hildur. We
Yep.
love
So I
that.
honestly, she is
Grandma Hildur.
Grandma Hildur. Yeah, she is a force to be reckoned with. Never met a stranger, always full of sunshine, and a teacher. So I have questions for her to help me navigate different things.
Yeah, I love it. I love that
She
you're
would host
choosing
that book
somebody.
though, so don't tell grandma about the book.
Don't we want to tell grandma about the book, but I love that you chose your grandmother. Tell us about a hobby activity that just fills you with joy. Like
I
just the
have
thing
3.
that oh, I love this. The thing that you lose track of time, so much
Yep.
joy. Yeah.
I have 3, and 2 of them I'm getting back into after not doing them for a long time. So I play the guitar, and I'm a rocker through and through. So that I I play a lot of that, which is a lot of fun. I paint acrylic painting, realism paintings. That's something I could get lost in forever, and drive my car as fast as I can on the track.
I
So
love it.
love
What are
to
you
race
driving?
how.
We got lots of car folks that listen. Isn't it funny, Amber? I always find that the hobby thing is it should be the question I should open with my quick fire questions,
I have
probably.
a Mustang GT Premium. Not I
Nice.
wish it was a Shelby, but, working on that.
Well,
But,
we all can't
she's
drive
pretty
a
quick.
Shelby now, can we? It's just financially unfeasible for most humans on the planet.
But and I had her for since January, and, I call her a her because she is.
Yeah,
And,
most cars are. Yeah.
love to race her. She's a lot of fun. A
She got
friend
a
of
name?
mine,
You name your car?
Nico, the blue shark, fastest shark in the world.
I love it. I
Mm.
love it. Amber, it's so great having you on the show today. You have any last thoughts for our listeners that you want to share? Just anything we didn't touch on, something burning you want to share with everybody?
I think the final thought is it's easy for us to say, and it's hard for us to do. It's easy for us to say, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to work out. I'm going to go to bed earlier. I'm going to not send that email and then not check my email. Ooh, right? It's easy to say and hard to do. But once you start to do, then it becomes easier. You just have to start.
I love it. Amber, where can our listeners find you? What's the best platforms, location to get in touch with you and your work?
Sure. The easiest way would be either LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you can find me by my name, Amber R. Carlson. My company name, Archway Learning Solutions, you can find that on LinkedIn as well, and that's an easy way to find me. Or my company's website, which is Archway Learning Solutions with an S at the end.com. There's a contact form there where you can connect and do a free consultation with either myself or one of my other teammates. But of course, you can always ask to talk to me and reference this podcast, and they will connect you to me directly.
We love it. We will, of course, put links to all of these things that Amber mentioned, including her book, Torch, some of the other wonderful things that she mentioned, and books and resources as well, including the learning platform that she talked about. Amber, it's been a pleasure having you on our show today. I hope you'll come back and join us again and share your wisdom with us. For our listeners, Amber maybe said it best, but I'll sum it up this way. We can do hard things one step at a time, but we can do hard things. Until next time, please, please, please take care of yourself, and we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you for having me.
Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, CHEFALO, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.